The Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, so where we are is what the hell? It's Friday, and
It looks
you
like
would have
Pennsylvania is leaning towards Biden.
Yep.
Georgia's leaning towards Biden. It's basically over for Trump.
I mean, if you look at it, you don't see a lot of avenues for success on this one. I mean, look, Pennsylvania, they're still saying, rightly so, it's too close to call. They've got 8,000 some odd military absentee ballots still to count. The assumption would be those would be for Trump, just like they assume a lot of the mail-in ballots in the Philadelphia area or Allegheny, or it will be for Biden. But they have to go through that process. Now, Pennsylvania is an interesting one, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that are getting very pissy about Trump's attitude towards this whole thing. And could he be more eloquent? Could he just shut the fuck up and let the system work, right? Let his legal teams do what they're supposed to do and what they're entitled to do, and just say, we just have to work through the process? Well, yeah, he could. Of course he could, but he's not going to. But Pennsylvania is interesting because the problem up there, and maybe there's no fucking fraud. You have to. It's like an investigation, right? When you do an investigation, you have to base it on, right from the very beginning, you have to base it on facts, on something concrete, right? If you don't, you're building an entire investigation potentially on very shaky ground. The whole thing comes tumbling down, and it's a house of shit. So, it's like an operation, intel operation. Everybody remembers, or maybe not, the WMD, fiasco, from Iraq. The idea that, oh my God, we got to get in there because they got WMD. Well, a lot of that, was based on one source reporting, right? Which got into the reporting chain and then got reinvented in another report, and then got self-corroborated in other reporting. And before you know it, you're confirming all the same information from originally that one source, right? Very shaky. So you're not building an invasion of a country on solid information. So with Pennsylvania, if people are looking at that and going, oh, there's all sorts of shit going on and it's fraud, well, you got to step back and you got to say, okay, where are the problems? Now, there's a handful of issues that I think are legitimate in Pennsylvania, one of them being this idea that the state Supreme Court circumvented what the legislative branch in Pennsylvania said about ballots and when you can count the ballots up until what time, the postmarking on the ballots, and so that's a legitimate issue that probably or could end up in a higher court. Is, did the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania have that right, according to the Constitution, to just because the state houses in each state set the laws about this very thing. And you got a problem, though, in Pennsylvania because the state house is run by Republicans. Now, this bullshit about how long it's taking to count the votes could have been sorted out if a year ago, or not even that, if 6 months ago, when we knew this pandemic was a problem, when we knew we were going to get unprecedented levels of mail-in votes, if the Republican state house had said, okay, here's when we can start counting those mail-in votes, as soon as we start receiving them. How about that? So they could have been well ahead. So it's both sides have fucked this up, right? It's not one side or the other. Both sides, once again, the truth is always, we talked about this before, is always somewhere in the center, and that's true here. But anyway, Pennsylvania, close to call. This idea that they're preventing observers from coming in or standing close enough, because they allowed them in, but then, were they able to stand close enough to observe anything of any value? That should never be in question. Right?
So they let them in. Is this all been corroborated? This is proven? They let them in, but they wouldn't let them actually observe what they were doing?
Yeah, there was delays in some districts, right? Because counties run these elections, and so some counties do it by the book, and others apparently have decided they can do things a little bit differently. So some they were not able to get in as far as access goes, as once the voting started. Some they weren't able to go in for the pre-vote counting or the pre-voting day counting of these ballots. And others, they were able to go in and they were kept maybe 25 feet back instead of what
That's
apparently
crazy.
was like a 6 feet distance that had been, I think, don't quote me on this, but maybe responsibly decided that you could be 6 feet away because of social distancing.
Read it 25 feet away? That seems insane.
Exactly. Some places had them watching on monitors, which again is useless. But the problem there is that should never happen. You should be able to always agree, both sides, that you need campaign observers in there, and they have that right to observe the counting of these things. And it all comes down to the same issue, whether it's that or whether it's counting ballots because or discarding ballots because the person's died previous to the election. It all comes down to the perception of fraud. There may not be anything going on in this election in terms of fraudulent activity when all is said and done and all the investigations are done. But the damage is already done because people perceive it as possible. A lot of people perceive it as likely or as happening. And if you don't have a transparent system set up, right, that is easy to see, you've got to be able to look at it and not be told by politicians, or not be told by election officials or the media that it's a good, credible system. The voter has to be able to look at the process and say, yeah, that's fair and transparent. And it's like it's like cover for action, right? If I'm doing surveillance on some target, right, and I'm out in the middle of whether it's a shithole or whether it's an urban center in a developed country, I have to have cover for action. I have to have a reason that is plainly obvious by passerbys or by local authorities or police that patrol the area. Oh, I get it. That's why he's there, right? We did an op one time where it was overseas. We were waiting for a target to show up, and it was a port, right? And a lot of people coming and going, tourists, workers, commercial workers, everybody coming and going from this busy port. And what you didn't have a lot of people just hanging out, right? There weren't a lot of opportunities just to hang out. So you had to have a reason, right? So what do? You set somebody down there with a couple of pieces of luggage and a baby stroller and a baby. Don't ask me where we got the baby from. And you
just stole a baby.
Hey, it's for the good of the country. And we requisitioned it. We have a baby requisition department down in the basement of the agency. No, we don't. No. It was my own baby, actually. It was my daughter when she was a little baby.
You used your own daughter during a covert operation?
Why, is that wrong?
I don't think so.
No,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, and so it worked like a charm because they could sit there for hours, right, waiting theoretically for a boat, but obviously pulling surveillance from an observation post, and people walking by were like, yeah, there's some lady with a baby, suitcases. To cover for action. They whacked an industrialist in Germany one time, where the hit team, it was very elaborate, but they did what they always do. They surveil, they figure out the guy's routes, and as is usual, your choke points. That's what they're looking for. You get in a vehicle and you drive, you're going to have choke points. Usually, it's at the place of work or it's at your home, right? But it may be somewhere in between. Maybe there's an avenue that's always blocked up. Maybe there's a turn that they have to come to a complete stop. You're looking for that choke point where you can lay out the attack, where you control the environment. Right? There was a place in the Philippines, it still exists. We used to call it Ambush Alley, right? Because you'd start at one end, you go to the other, and it was a cut through. There weren't that very many of them, and sometimes it was the only one to get from one part of the city to another. And once you got in there, you just hit the gas because you were a host. If you got caught up in there and there was an insurgency going on, and so roadblocks and local hit teams, they call them Sparrow units, were always a concern. And so that was a choke point. Ambush Alley was a choke point. Anyway, long story short, they whacked this industrialist, but the hit team, who after they'd done their surveillance and they decided where that point was for the attack, they showed up one day in construction gear and construction uniforms and started digging a trench as a construction team, right? You can look at, you drive by, you go, oh, they're building something, or they're digging a trench, right? Uh-huh. It's cover for action. And so it's this, I don't know how I'm making this analogy, but it's the same with the election. Voters got to be able to look at it and go, it's transparent. I see why it's transparent. I can move on.
You're talking about fuckery.
Yeah.
You're talking about them. They did a bad job of hiding corruption. That's what you're saying. You say cover for action it's deceptive. Like what you're describing is deceptive.
Well, what I'm saying is the system has to be clearly transparent and honest and credible by just from the voter's perspective.
Right.
You can't do shit like adjust the rules about just because we say, pandemic, now we got to change the rules, and these states are going to change them and these states won't, and this state has this.
How did you make the connection from that to Cover for Action?
Because I know.
Because you think like an operative.
Yeah. Cover for Action is because sorry, I know this is try being in my house and try being part of my family and following me at the dinner table. It's because with Cover of Action, just like with looking at the voting and saying, okay, I see why it's transparent. I see Cover of Action. You got to look and go, okay, I get it. That's what they're there for, and you move on. You don't think about it. You don't have to be told. You don't have to stop and go, excuse me, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. Right? It's just evident on the face of it.
How are there not universal voting rules for each state that are federal? How is it that different states are allowed to come up with their own rules? Like I was reading something about in Georgia, they were allowing people who had made mistakes on their ballots to redo their ballots, mm-hmm. and they called them curing the ballots.
Yeah. You've got that. You've also got
what is that?
You've got the ability to change your vote too in some places.
What?
Yeah, you can change your vote up until up until the deadline of the election day. There are some places where you can go in, you have to request it, and then you can change your vote. Which, if you think about it, is not bad, because if on election day you wake up and you find out that the candidate you voted for has committed murder, then you think, okay, I'd like to change my vote.
Well, I think a lot of people did want to actually change their vote after the second Biden debate. That was a big Google search.
God.
There was a thing that they were talking about, the Google searches for how to change your vote went up some astounding number.
Yeah.
Because he just had a really terrible debate. No one has done worse on the campaign trail and won. That's
I
one
agree
thing.
with you.
And more people vote
in
this election than have ever voted.
Yeah.
Since like the early 1900s or something, right?
Kamala Harris, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think, we should fact check this, but I don't think she held a press conference during the entire campaign. I don't think she had one single press conference. She had appearances, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think she actually held a press conference during the entire campaign. That's astounding, right? But yeah, I agree. Look, we're in this position that we're in right now in a variety of ways, and because of the pandemic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience are now free on Spotify. That's right, they're free. From September 1st to December 1st, they're going to be available everywhere. But after December 1st, they will only be available on Spotify, but they will be free. That includes the video. The video will also be there. It'll also be free. That's all we're asking. Just go download Spotify. Much love. Bye-bye.